Hello, ladies and gentlemen, youth, mid-age or old. You want to better your life chances, better your life circumstances. Time change. Maybe I start university course, open university, adult learning. Anyway, when you read, make sure you reference your reading so you know your tutor or any of my other listeners know where you're reading from, where the content comes from. When the module DD 211, Understanding Politics, Ideas and Institutions in the Modern World. The book is edited by Geoff Andrews, Agnes Sajaki, Andrew Kane, Pavoknik and Dan Taylor. It was published at Open University, Walton Hall, Milton Keynes, published in 2015 and edited in 2020. We're on page 340, chapter 11, Feminism. The concept of experience, completely Schneider, 2008, page 184, highlights, for example, that women still look to personal experience to provide knowledge about how the world operates and to trouble dominant narratives about how things should be. Indeed, the personal story constitutes one of the central hallmarks of third wave feminism. The concept of personal is political, still underpins feminism. Personal experience are still shared, albeit through social media such as the For Gender online magazine, rather than second wave consciousness raising groups. It claims in the third wave personal narrative continues to play an important role in helping young women recognise that their experiences of opposing or discrimination are not isolated, as well as striving to embrace a wider range of identity positions. Third wave feminists also do not try to present a unified vision or agree a set of aims which all women can sign up to. This reflects the context within which many third wave feminists grew up. The rise of individualism in the 1980s impacted upon many collective movements, including feminism in various ways, but perhaps most importantly, it worked against expressions and actions of solidarity. Any notion of sisterhood was regulated to second place, lagged behind a form of factoid individualism, which seemed to say every woman for herself. Yet exclusion and individualism do not come without a price. Collective feminist action is made more difficult if there is no unified group around which it can coalesce. But that does not mean that women cannot act together. Snyder, 2018, page 188. It argues that the third wavers do not feel the need to spend a lot of time on constructing theoretical analysis or justifying on what grounds they are acting. They just do it. Others can either join them or do their own thing. Thus, although not a social movement in the way the second wave feminism can be defined, third wave feminists do engage in politics, often acting as individuals who nevertheless can coalesce around key issues. The internet has proved an enormously powerful tool for today's feminists. The use of blogs, Twitter campaigns, and online petitions is testament to the diversity and strength of feminist campaigns. These range from online campaign led by Caroline Corrado Perez to have a woman other than the Queen on UK banknotes, figure 6, to a Twitter campaign, Let Shoes Be Shoes. An online petition which criticised Clarkshire for using sexist language to advertise shoes for boys and girls. The advertiser suggested that boys were adventurous and interested in active outdoor play that would destroy shoes, while girls were more interested in fashion and looking pretty. Moss 2014, the Everyday Sexism Project, epitomises this new way of doing politics. The website started in April 2012 and was so successful that just 1 year later, it had attracted tens of thousands of women worldwide writing about street harassment, sexual harassment, workplace discrimination, and body shaming they encounter. The project embodies the fact feminist phrase, the personal is political, and consciousness raising exercise that encourages women to see how inequality affects them. It proves these problems are individual but collective and might therefore have political solutions. Contemporary feminism might be less of a movement than our second wave counterparts, but they are nevertheless political. Feminism organising concepts. Regardless of the diversity of feminism and the various splits and divisions that have often characterised the movement, feminism as an ideology is characterised by a set of these themes, organising concepts. 5.1 The public-private divide. 3.4.2 The first organising concept is the public-private dichotomy, constitutive of liberal political thought and practice, in which politics is understood as something which takes place within a public sphere, separate from the family life to personal relationships of the private sphere. The public-private divide is just one of the manifestation of a binary. Either or way of thinking, which underpins conventional and narrow understandings of the political. This not a way of thinking, evident is such oppositional. It pairs as reason, emotion, mind, body, clock time, natural time, independence, dependence, is problematic because of the gendered and hierarchical nature of these dichotomies. With the dominant superior category in each pairing associated with men and the subordinate inferior category with women. Feminists right back to me, Wollstonecraft, have understood that politics is not just confined to the public sphere and that the exercise of male power in the public and private spheres is connected. On one hand, women's private lives condition their public lives, physical, psychological and cultural barriers. It constrains women's public involvement on a very simple level. More women carry caring responsibilities compared to men in relation to the young, the sick and the elderly, and these act as powerful practical obstacles to women's political involvement. And Phillips. It notes that their mere pressure of time will keep most women out of any of the process of decision making on offer. The business day and parliamentary timetable, for instance, assume that someone else is doing the housework and looking after the children or others who require care. In addition to such practical barriers, there are other more subtle barriers, such as psychological constraints. Many women might feel guilty if they don't look after their children, as well as cultural barriers, which still often portray politics as being the domain of men and not women. Page 343. On the other hand, the public sphere also affects women's private lives. Radical feminists highlight that public policies, or the lack of them, often confirm women's private obligations, for example, the lack of coherent public policy with regard to childcare or caring for the elderly, because both areas are traditionally considered to be the concern of private individuals. It limits the role women can play in public life. In short, who collects the children and who makes tea is a vital political concern, Phillips said in 1991, page 97. Similarly, the requirement on a woman requesting an abortion in the UK to obtain signatures of 2 doctors is a further illustration of how public law determines women's private lives. The key point about personal is political slogan in its recognition of the interdependence between 2 spheres and the influence of each other. However, although feminists generally advocate greater public intervention in so-called private areas such as domestic violence or childcare, most feminists do not advocate an end to the distinction between public and private spheres that might harm what is positive about private life. The important point, therefore, is not that the distinction should disappear, but it should be uncoupled from the distinction between men and women. However, as Blakely and Bryson, 2007, page 3, argue, exposing the facility and gendered nature, A, not A, thinking is the easy part. Moving beyond such a binary thinking of it is more difficult. Barbara O'Neill highlights the importance of not just reconciling the dichotomies, but transcending them. Which one combines the gender nature of the dualities with the understanding that politics cannot exist without a private and natural world against what it is constructed? Then the task cannot simply be to move women from the worlds in which they exist, that is, the private and natural spheres, in the world of politics. Rather, it will be necessary to rethink the nature of politics. Patriarchy. The second organised concept of feminism is patriarchy. This term literally means rule by the father. but it is used more broadly in the feminist to describe the power relationship between men and women. It is linked to the feminist critique of the public private dichotomy in the sense that it refers to a system of male domination that pervades all aspects of life. Page 344. There is no single analysis of patriarchy. For example, liberal feminists tend not to see the term, preferring instead to focus on equality rights, while socialist feminists are more likely to focus on the economic aspect of patriarchy and the relationship between gender and class oppression. But its use is the most associated with the radical feminists of the second wave, according to Valerie Bryson, 1999, page 312. Many feminists today use patriarchy simply as a shorthand for male power and male-dominated society, and is with other aspects. The term can be misused or stretched too far. However, Bryson argues that it remains of vital importance as organising the concept of feminism. First, it is used because it provides a permanent reminder that men rather than women are the dominant and structurally privileged gender group. Second, it is important because naming male power, it is a vital first step in the process of understanding women's oppression and a subordination in order that they can be challenged and changed. Finally, its abandonment would mean that women will continue to be taken by surprise at the obstacles that confront them, and they will be denied a way of seeing the world that challenges dominant, male-centered common sense assumptions, sex versus agenda. A third theme within feminism is the traditional distinction made between sex and gender, which is summed up in Simone de Beauvoir's famous comment that one is not born, but rather becomes a woman, 1973, page 301. In this distinction, it refers to a biological difference between men and women, which are traditionally at least being considered natural and therefore unrelatable. Gender, on the other hand, is about culture rather than biology and has been used to refer to the different roles of men and women that are socially constructed. Gender is thus a concept of concern of both men and women. Research into how gender is constructed in ways that are unhelpful to men who feel they don't confirm hegemonic notions of masculinity. See Connell 2005, for example, has a much interest as research into dominant notions of femininity. Although some feminists have considered the distinction between sex and gender helpful, it has been criticised. On one hand, different feminists argue that there are essential biological differences between women and men. Different feminists thus argue that the inclusion of women into the public life would be positive, not just for women, but for society in general, because women would enhance public life and add into female qualities of cooperation and enduring abilities. For example, on the other hand, some feminists, particularly on the third wave, question the very category of sex and gender. Sex is not clear but cut biological difference for many men and women, and gender is similarly fluid. Equality and difference. Difference feminists have also contributed to the final organising theme within feminism, equality and difference. Ever since the first wave of feminism, a key feminist goal has been the achievement of equality with men. This goal has been particularly pertinent for liberal feminists who strive to ensure that liberal principles of equality and freedom apply to men and women alike. For other feminists, particularly socialist and radical feminists, however, the goal of achieving political and legal equality has been shown to be insufficient to achieve social equality in all spheres of life. A related difficulty with achieving equality is articulated by Phillips 1991, page 53, who claims that although universality is in many ways a condition to which we aspire, because it means that all humans will be treated equally, there is also the risk that denies it. What are very real social differences that will prevent us from being treated the same? Phillips therefore argues that achieving equality might mean treating women differently, although this principle is hard for liberal feminists to accept. A rather different challenge to equality comes from different feminists who challenge the desirability of achieving equality with men. To achieve equality with men in this view implies defining women's goals on the same terms as men's. Phillips 1991, page 37, notes that when men and women are treated the same, it means women are treated as if they were men. When men and women are treated differently, the men is the norm against which the woman is peculiar, lacking, and different. This is a line of argument taken, for example, to explain Margaret Thatcher's success. Exonery 2010, page 10, asserts that if Thatcher's image and politics say anything about feminism in the 1980s, it is that despite a 1970s theory and activism, a woman had to adopt patriarchal attitudes and perversely endorse patriarchal tactics in order to enjoy the privilege of being at the top of the ladder. Effectively, she had become one of the boys. Different feminists, by contrast, argue that women should achieve fulfillment on the basis of qualities and experiences which are seen as unique to women. These differences are based on the belief that women and men are fundamentally different psychologically and biological. In the conclusion on page 347, over the course of the 20th century, feminism developed from a movement to an ideology. At the start of the 20th century, there are those who doubt its credentials as either social movement or ideology. Ironically, this is due to its many success, which have allowed some feminists to declare that for our generation, feminism is like fluoride. We scarcely note that we will have it. It is simply the water. The Baum, Gardner, and Richards quoted in Snyder, 2008. It is undeniable that the position of women has improved in many countries as a result of the extension of political and legal rights to women and their improved access to education, work and public services. Many women now enjoy better protection from discrimination, more economic independence, more representation in public life, more sexual freedoms and more reproductive choice than did previous generations. Yet, although feminism is now part of the mainstream, shortcomings remain. Despite the success of the campaign to keep a woman on a Bank of England banknote, the feminist campaigner Caroline Credo Perez and some of her more prominent supporters, such as the MP Stella Creasy, were exposed to the wave of abuse, which included threats of sexual violence using the very medium, Twitter, that had aided the success of the campaign over 40 years. From 1970 Equal Pay Act, the Fawcett Society, which campaigns for equal pay, founded in 2012. When comparing only full-time work, that women earned an average of 14.9% less per hour than men, so that for every pound a man takes home, a woman takes home 85p. The Fawcett Society, 2013a. Women also remain underrepresented in public life, although women's representation in national parliaments has improved dramatically within some European countries, Spain, and many more of the Nordic countries. For example, have almost achieved greater parity within their national stagnate. In the UK, although women's representation in the House of Commons more than doubled in the 1997 election, it has since tended to hover around 20% mark. Inter-Parliamentary Union 2014. Moreover, the point is not just that women are underrepresented, but also that women's diversity is not represented. Black and ethnic minority women, older and younger women, women from low social economic groups, disabled women and lesbian, bisexual, transgender. Women are all underrepresented in public life. The Fawcett Society. It notes that in the contemporary UK, only 7% of the FTSE 100 dictatorship list of share price on the London Stock Exchange are held by women. Only 15.6% of the High Court judges are women, and there's just one female Supreme Court justice. While the media, women represent just 5% of the editors of national newspaper. Such shortcomings, however, pale into comparison with the effects of patriarchy elsewhere in the world. Hayward, 2003, page 346, notes that in parts of development, the patriarchy still assumes a cruel, even gruesome form. 80 million women, mainly in Africa, are subject to the practice of circumcision. Bride murders still occur in India, and the persistence of the dowry system ensures that the female children are often unwanted and sometimes allowed to die. This fact alone is sufficient to explain the continuing pertinence of the organising concepts which undermine feminism as an ideology that continuing political importance as a movement, however fragmented it currently may be. Page 348. Page 348. The old mate.